The next field type we're going to talk about is the multi-select field. We can create a multi-select field called industry. You can select multiple options. This field is very similar to a single select field, except you can choose multiple options. In the example I'm using, you can imagine a cafe with lots of food and beverage and treats, and a retail section where they're selling pottery or art or handmade products. In this example, the client will fall under both food and beverage and retail. Another element of this is that your multi-select records can also be very easily turned into linked records as well. We'll talk about the pros and cons of that in a moment. Now, the good news is that you've gotten through all of the easier field types that we can talk about, and there's no bad news. You just have to pay attention to how the rest of these fields work. They're very, very important. The linked fields are what makes Airtable so special. They create relationships between the different types of records within your data. For example, we already have a linked field set up, and that's our client and project relationship that we have right now. As a recap from the design phase, the client and project relationship is a parent and child relationship. So the client is the parent record and the project is a child record. And there is also a one-to-many relationship, meaning one client can have multiple projects. While we're discussing linked fields, we should also build out the rest of the linked relationships in our database. Projects will also have a one-to-many relationship to tasks. Tasks could have a one-to-many relationship to time logs. In theory, I think tasks should also have a one-to-one relationship with the assignee. I'm going to also add in the task name field. You might have noticed by now I did not use the first column for my task name. We'll talk about that in just a moment when we get to the formula section. Now let's address when we should use a linked field versus a single or multiple select field. A lot of teams, when they first start using Airtable, every single field is a single select or a multi-select field for their statuses, for the different types of tags a project or a product might have, and it becomes a very colorful database. Let's say we had a couple more examples. John's Guitar Shop is a retailer and Sam's Real Estate Corporation is a real estate company. So over time, our database will be very colorful. The same is true for your single select fields because all of the selection options will have really nice colors and a lot of clients will really like that. I think that's one of the main pluses of using a single or multi-select field. From my perspective, I much prefer using a linked field. Even if it's for statuses, it really depends on the type of team you have. If your team is pretty comfortable using data inside of a grid view and you're not too concerned about colors, I would definitely recommend using a linked field. Because there are significantly more features, you can work with it. There's different types of data you can pull from a linked field, so I really prefer that. If you do any kind of tagging in your database, I highly recommend that to be a linked field. It makes it easier to maintain. For example, if you have a list of 50 tags, very often it's super easy for your team to accidentally add tags, whereas if you have all of those tags on a separate table altogether, it makes the adding and editing a little bit more difficult, so you protect your data. In this case, I'm going to create a duplicate of the industry table. And I will call this column industry linked. Next, I'll convert it into a linked field. When you're converting it into a linked field, you can create a new table. And this will help you create a list of industries. You can see that the clients are linked in these industries as well. After you created this industry linked field and the associated table, you can see that the industry linked column back on the clients table is now grayed out. So linked records do not have the same colors, but it does allow you to have significantly more functionality. One of the things that we talked about earlier was the count field type. This count field type is related to a specific linked field. So for example, if I wanted to count my industry multi-select field, that would be more difficult because I would have to write a formula to hopefully identify the different options I've selected. However, if I use my linked field, I can add a count to see how many industries is this client in. So you can see that now this count column is showing me the number of industries that each of my clients belong in. Using a linked table is also especially helpful when you are trying to tie that field to multiple different tables. For example, if you had a status field for both your projects and your tasks, it's a really great idea to store the same set of statuses in one table. So I just created a project status field on my projects table. And I'll also create a task status field on the tasks table. Next, I'm going to create a new table. And the name for the new table is going to be status. Now in this new status table, I can add in the statuses I'm interested in. So at the moment, I might just have 3 different statuses for the sake of testing. Now back on my tasks table, I can select the 3 different statuses. Now I have some tasks with some statuses, and I'll do the same for the project status. After we created the 2 links from our status table to the tasks and projects table, you can see that we've got a tasks column and a project column on our status table. This kind of setup is very helpful when you're doing any kind of tagging because it allows you to maintain one list of statuses across multiple different tables. It's especially important because you never want to have too many lists of the same thing. For example, some of my clients might tag their projects based on project type, and then they might tag their tasks based on the task type, and there could be 90% overlap in their tags. And what happens is that you never know what tags are going to be on which tables. And then you end up with 2 different places to maintain the same list of information, which is not a good thing to have. One word of caution, I think tagging is very good when it comes to using a separate table and linking the tables. Statuses, it could really go both ways depending on your preference. So personally, I like keeping my statuses on a separate table. But a lot of users do like the ability to move things around in a Kanban board. And in those scenarios, you might not want a separate table because the Kanban boards inside of Airtable only work with single select fields. We'll talk about views in a lot more detail later, but I just want to show you what I mean with the statuses. I created a single select field for task status as well. So now my colors are there, it looks great. Then I'm going to create a view called a Kanban view. If you've used Trello or other Kanban-based tools, you'll be very familiar with this type of view. When you create a Kanban view, you can choose a single select field. And once that has been selected, you'll see your different tasks populated based on status. And you can move the tasks around, which is very helpful because that changes their status as well. So if I move something from in progress to complete, and then I move task 1 from new to in progress, their statuses will also change. You can see this over here. Initially, my 3 statuses were new, in progress, and completed. And now by moving them in the Kanban board, I have in progress, complete, and complete. So depending on what your team prefers, you can make that call on whether you want a single or multi-select field or if you want a separate table. Thanks for investing in your own knowledge base. I'm Cherry Yang, the founder of Claribase. We're going to be releasing our flagship course, Airtable Mastery, for free. In the course, you can find over 100 videos on topics like design, integration, automations, and interfaces. It's perfect for the Airtable champion who wants to build their database right the first time. You can sign up for the course at the link down below.